Okay, so this is the Galaxy A03s, the successor to the A02s. You see, when I reviewed the A02s, I mentioned that one thing was lacking, the fingerprint sensor. They added that to the A03s. Everything else was kind of the same though. This is the A04s, and you can tell right away that the design is different, but is that all that's different? And is it perhaps worth the upgrade? Now I think that there are two types of people watching this video. No wait, three types. The first group are those who are watching just cause they are subscribed. You guys are the real MVPs. I love you guys so much. Okay. The second group are those choosing between the A03s and the A04s. And then the third group are those who own the A03s and are thinking if they should upgrade to the A04s. Well, at the end of this video, I should be able to satisfy every single person. Let's begin. Okay, first off, design. I think this is a clear win for the A04s. Everyone, every day, would pick the A04s's design. It's more modern and looks more premium. It looks very similar to the Galaxy A13, and that's a good thing. But this has like a grainier look. Not sure that's a word, but I'm going to say it anyway. Yeah, the A03s definitely looks dated, especially with that camera module. Ew. I do like that they changed the rear design, but I don't like that they went from matte to glossy. So the A04s shows a whole lot more fingerprints, while the A03s shows next to none. Ports and buttons are all in the same place. Two mics, one button foreign speaker, USB Type-C, the headphone jack, dual SIM and SD card tray is also here, the power button / fingerprint reader combo, you know, they're all in the same place. And this is just a tiny detail, but the A04s is slightly taller, like ever so slightly, and it's also thicker. Now, that's not really a problem though, but I do have a problem with the front of these phones. Look at that chin! Like, come on, it's 2022, your screen should not be this ugly. Maybe I need to calm down. Speaking of screens, we've got a 6.5-inch 720p LCD display on both phones. The same PPI, the same brightness, not the same screen to body ratio though. Remember, I said the A04s is slightly taller. There's actually 1.1% more bezel on the newer phone, which is weird, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter. But what does matter is the refresh rate. So with the A04s, we get a 90Hz refresh rate. That's cool. It's actually adaptive, so it switches between 60Hz and 90Hz based on what you're doing on the screen. So while scrolling and just navigating the phone's UI, it should feel really smooth and more responsive when compared to the 60Hz on the A03s. As far as actual quality of the screens go, I struggle to really tell them apart. They look really similar to me. Can you spot the difference? Performance is also another category where it was really difficult to differentiate the two. Kind of. In terms of the chipset inside, they are different. The A03s has the Helio P35 chipset, while the A04s has the Exynos 850, which is the same chipset on the Galaxy A13. They're both octa-core processors, but the A04s uses the newer Cortex A55 over the A53, which the Galaxy A03s uses. It's about 18% more powerful, and because it's on a smaller nanometer process, it also uses less power. Single core scores are pretty identical, but not the multi-core scores. Opening apps are slightly faster on the A04s, doing anything menial like texting, scrolling around the UI, even some light gaming would feel pretty similar on both phones. But doing a bit more on your phone is when you might see these more powerful cores flexing their muscles. I want to add though that this is a budget phone, so when I say words like powerful, you know, remember it's a budget phone. Because even when navigating the phone, it does stutter at times. It does okay when multitasking, but it doesn't hold that many apps open for a long time. Or even when it comes to gaming, this would play heavy titles at like very low settings, but you would still experience frame drops. So not great for heavy gaming, but the less graphic intensive ones would do just fine. Like I said, it's still a budget phone, so it's kind of expected. Let's talk about software. They're both running core versions of One UI 4.1 and Android 12. The A03s came out of the box with Android 11 and then got the Android 12 update, which is the last update you would ever get, while the A04s came out of the box with Android 12 and is set to get Android 13, which is also its last major OS update. One UI is fine. I haven't really had any serious bugs with the A03s and so far with the 4S. I'm also a big fan of Material U and all of the customizations it brings with it. The A04s would still get Android 13 while the A03s wouldn't. That counts as an upgrade. Not sure if you've been paying attention, but in every single category so far, there has been an upgrade. And the next category is probably the most important for most people. The cameras. Yes, we also got an upgrade. They went with a 50 megapixel main sensor compared to the 13 megapixel that we had on the A03s. That's a pretty huge jump, and it's really the only difference in the camera system, literally. But how do the photos look? Well, better. Clearly. When taking photos of objects, cars, buildings, plants, the A03s looks old and like antique, if that makes sense. I mean, look at this photo and then look at the one from the A04s. They look a couple years apart, at best. And the same thing applies when taking human subjects as well. They just lacked contrast and look bad. But I think the A04s did a much better job. So the main camera is definitely a much needed upgrade. The selfie camera though isn't exactly good. It does look a bit better when compared to its predecessor, but yeah, overall not great. Video maxes out at 1080p for the rear and front facing camera of both phones. There is no image stabilization, the quality on both are bad, but it's worse than the A03s. But then again, you're not buying a mid-range phone here, this is a budget phone, and this is where they make sacrifices. Battery is the only category where budget phones are actually comparable to mid-range phones and even flagships in terms of how long the phones last. You can expect to get up to 7 hours of screen on time with fairly average use, and that's thanks to its 5000 mAh battery. This is also the first category where there isn't an upgrade, and I might even argue that there is a downgrade. Not in terms of charging speeds though, it's still 15 watts, which is painfully slow. I'm actually talking about the battery life. If you remember, I did say that the A04s has a 90Hz refresh rate. That would take up more battery juice. Might not be much, but it would. Now I didn't do like a drain test or anything, but it's safe to say that the A03s lasts longer than the A04s. I'm sure it's not by much, but technically it's a downgrade. Upgraded design, display, performance, camera, about the same battery life. That is the A04s. Now, if you're picking between the A03s and A04s, the A04s is clearly better, and I think no one should be going for the A03s because they're so similar in price. For the 64GB variant, the A03s costs $112,000, while the A04s costs $114,000. And it comes with more RAM. And depending on when you're watching this, you can also get the 64GB variant on Jumia for $95,000. It's like a Black Friday thing. So yeah, every single time pick the A04s over the A03s. But what if you have the A03s and you're thinking of upgrading? Should you do that? Maybe. If any of the upgrades Samsung made catches your eye, then you could try that. But if you don't really fancy the new 50 megapixel sensor or the Exynos 850 or 90Hz, then I would say hold on and wait for the Galaxy A05s. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you when you see me.